What even is Teflon? Teflon is a trademark of a company spin-off from DuPont called Chemours. Teflon serves as a pop term for what chemists would call polytetrafluoroethylene. Polytetrafluoroethylene are chains of carbon atoms that are saturated with fluorine. We're used to carbons being saturated with hydrogen because we eat these all the time, saturated fat. But when hydrogen is replaced with fluorine, we get our hydrophobic material, polytetrafluoroethylene, or Teflon. Why is polytetrafluoroethylene so hydrophobic? Fluorine is a ferocious element. In fact, although oxygen is the most notorious oxidizer, fluorine is the most electronegative of oxidizers. Okay, stay with me and pay attention. When we look at the periodic table of elements, we can see the fluorine is the element after oxygen. The rule is that every atom can only have 8 electrons in its outer shield, except for hydrogen and helium, but that's for another video. We call these valence electrons. If an atom has 8 valence electrons, like argon, neon, and all the elements in group 10, it is characterized by being inert, which is to say it has little interest in interacting with other atoms. Since bonds between most atoms are formed with pairs of electrons, atoms look for other atoms that have valence electrons to share. And since carbon has 4 valence electrons, it wants to form 4 bonds, so it's content with 8 valence electrons. Fluorine has 7 valence electrons in its outer shield, so fluorine is really eager to form 1 bond so it can have 8 valence electrons. Once fluorine finds an atom to bond with, it latches on. Fluorine is so electronegative, or electron craving, that it pulls carbon's electrons closer to itself, and carbon pulls right back, making fluorine's bond really tight. So fluorine goes from a really desperate atom with a high electronegativity to ultimately a clinger. Carbon, on the other hand, is extremely inviting. It has 4 electrons to share and pair. So in the case of polytetrafluoroethylene, carbon shares 2 electrons with neighboring carbons and 2 electrons with fluorines on each side, making the carbons content, creating a chain of carbons which are saturated with fluorine. So now we know the surface is covered with these polytetrafluoroethylene chains that don't want to interact with other chemical species. And if we put this Teflon on a shape that doesn't permit the fluids to touch most of its surface, then we get super hydrophobic behavior.
So combining those two things, you get a droplet that hardly touches the surface. It's more touching air than it is the actual surface, and the surface that it does touch, it doesn't wet very well. That's the tip of one of the posts, and that's the valley between posts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is super cool.